Coming up on Mountain Men.
This storm's forming right over me. Damn it. Looks like I'm gonna be here a little while.
So let's see if we can fire up that saw. How's that look? Oh, what in the world?
You're basically creating micro explosions. It's got the potential to go real bad real quick. That thing can blow.
Montana's trapping season is down to its final days. And in the Yak Valley, Tom Orr's determined to eke out every last fur.
Sean's running the majority of the traps that we've got out right now, and I'm trying to find a few places where we can still pick up a few furs before the season ends. All right.
At 75, Tom's nearly retired from trapline duties. But today, he's back in action for a final push.
Our catch this year hasn't been as good as what it was last year, so we're trying to make up for it right now.
Looking for a sure thing, Tom's targeting an old honey hole deep in the wilderness.
This is our last big shot where we can still bring some more furs to the table and end up with another successful season.
To get there, he's facing a 2-mile trek through the bush that would be grueling for even a much younger man.
This land that I'm trapping today, I haven't trapped it for years and years. But the problem is it's a long canoe drag to get back into it. And you got to pull the canoe over the logs, and there's limbs sticking out.
But Tom isn't the type to shrink from a challenge.
It's just hard work getting in here. There's lots of easier places to get to than here, but the more remote, the better, if we want to be lucky and catch something.
In central Alaska.
How you doing, girl? Good little plane here.
Homesteader Morgan Beasley is finally prepared for takeoff.
All right.
It's been a week since he arrived in Talkeetna to retrieve his new wings,
That's pretty good.
where mechanical problems and weather kept him grounded.
Just gotta make sure I got everything.
Until today.
I've been, waiting for weeks now to get this plane out to the homestead. Mechanically, everything's working right. And I've got pretty clear skies. I'm just pretty excited to get out there.
An early spring blew in to melt the last of the snow in town. But he's facing a 150-mile journey home, and there's no telling what conditions he'll find once he's airborne.
So the first 60 miles, it's just over thick forest and some swamps and stuff. But then it goes up to the Alaska Range.
The Great Alaska Range is the 3rd highest in the world and contains the tallest peak in North America, Denali, an elevation of 20,000 feet.
This is a pretty intimidating thing to fly across these mountains. We've got 70, 80 miles of solid mountains between us and the other side of the world. It's not just 1 or 2 ridges, it's like 7 or 8.
Flying across these peaks is daunting for any pilot. But for a rookie like Morgan, there's an added risk.
There's some good emergency landing sites, but a lot of it's pretty snow-covered and would be a pretty rough, it'd be a crash landing, probably, if I have to go down.
In the bush, preparation can mean the difference between life and death. Morgan's mission today is to set up an emergency supply of fuel hidden midway between Talkeetna and his homestead.
The idea with the fuel cache is that if I have to fly into a bunch of storms or something, and I have to like retreat out of the mountains. I might be a little low on fuel to get all the way back to a town or a village. I'll load this thing up and do my pre-flight here. Checking the flaps, checking the propeller for any nicks. Are the wings solid? Basically check every moving part that might have an impact on the airplane. I'm gonna double check the pressure here. That one is a little low. These tires are set to run between 6 and 12 pounds per square inch. So I'm just gonna pump it up 1 PSI, make sure I'm well within the limits, and everything else looks good to go, ready for flight. So I think I'm gonna climb in and head out. Okay, excited to do this. There's a lot of unknowns, so fingers crossed, weather's good, and make it into this fuel cache and then into the homestead today.
Deep in North Carolina's Blue Ridge Mountain Wilderness,
Just kind of lay it out here on the ground.
Eustace Conway's hatching a plan to reclaim a lost opportunity.
Yeah, last year was a great success with the furniture business, so I'm thinking I can make a lot of nice furniture out of a big pine tree. So I can turn that into many thousands of dollars.
Last week, he and Joseph Roberts got an antique bandsaw up and running for the first time in decades.
This bandsaw has just really opened up a whole world of possibilities on this furniture making business.
The machine is the key to producing high-end homemade furniture, like the custom farm table he and Preston sold for top dollar last year.
Something like this could easily sell for $3,500.
Oh my God!
Wow.
With handcrafted items in high demand, an expert craftsman like Eustace can make a small fortune from just a few pieces of lumber and some elbow grease.
I mean, that's just solid.
Yeah, simple but functional and good lines.
And today's task is to test a potential new product, an early American-style bed frame.
Making these beds, I think, is really going to be key. I'm hoping we can get a premium dollar for these, so we can go make that down payment.
Eustace has been working all winter to raise money for a down payment on neighboring land that's recently gone up for sale.
I've spent my whole life trying to keep this place wild. If somebody puts a development right beside me here, that could really mess us up.
So far, he's raised $25,000 towards a bid on the property, but it may not be enough.
Does that line up pretty good?
It's pretty close to me.
Now, to bring in the most money possible, he's prototyping a bed frame using the ancient technique of mortise and tenon.
Oh, that looks good.
A method of construction that uses the wood itself, not glue or nails, to hold the frame together.
Well, let's see if we can fire up that saw and saw one, and if that all goes good, we'll come saw these other 3.
All right, sounds good.
Fire it up, Joseph. How's that look?
Yeah.
The solid wood is trimmed down to create a peg known as a tenon.
First tenon. Yeah, that looks pretty good. If you can handle cutting these, you cut some more tenons, I'll start laying off the mortise holes.
All right, sounds good.
Mortise holes bored into the adjoining piece of wood form a joint to hold the tenons in place.
I'll just drill a hole and then use a chisel to cut it out square so it exactly matches. And that's where we get a lot of this strength, is because the contact surface is big. Well, this one looks good. Doing a good job.
For the decorative centerpiece of the headboard, they cut an interlocking dovetail joint.
A dovetail is kind of like a tenon joint that's made like a triangle so that it can't pull back out. It's just a joint that holds itself together, and that's the beauty of it. What in the world?
In the Blue Ridge Mountains,
Oh, the belt broke.
Eustace's recently restored century-old bandsaw is on the fritz.
You just ripped that off. I'm glad it wasn't the blade that came flying off.
One of us be missing a finger.
The problem is a tear in the 10-foot belt.
Who knows where the pin went? The belt has connectors, and they're kind of like interwoven fingers, and then there's a pin that slides through. You can't really just run out to your local hardware store and buy another flat belt. They're kind of antiquated, and so I'm going to go try to find something that we can fix it with. Some fence wire.
Oh, yeah.
That'll do it, I think.
That'll work good. But this belt is crucial. I'm depending on this bandsaw to finish the rest of the bed. Keep it lined up. Really pay attention to that side.
There it went.
There we go. I wouldn't call it good as new, but I'd say it'll sure
I think it's
do.
gonna work. Well, there's one way to find out how good our fix is.
Yep. Well, right now, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed, but I think it's gonna work. There we go.
All right, let's see what it does.
Okay. Yeah! Woo! Go!
Now we got the bandsaw back up and running, we can finish our last few little cuts, and we'll be ready to start assembling this bed. We've measured and cut and done all our Mortise and tenon joints right and everything. It'll just kind of go together like a set of Lincoln logs.
No nails, no screws.
Yep. It's pretty neat.
Well, that looks good there, Joseph. Let's stand it up and
Check it out.
1, 2, 3. The closer this thing's to getting finished, it's starting to take shape, and Joseph and I are just really getting excited about seeing it come to life.
Well, what do you think?
I think that's a bed.
That's pretty cool.
A mixture of beeswax and linseed oil seals and protects the raw wood.
Man, I like this. Look at that.
This bed is a good example of the way mountain people in this area have been living forever, you know, like make something beautiful with what's around you. And so I think that's a pretty prime example of that. Hopefully a buyer is going to think that as well.
But the only way to find out if the bed will sell is to head to town.
I'm really hoping this bed will sell and get us some cash in our hands so we can go make that down payment.
On Alaska's Kodiak coast,
Come on, baby. One of my pontoons might be taking water.
bear hunter Mike Horstman's supply run is cut short, inches from shore. But with the tide coming in, there's nothing he can do until morning.
The barge is not floating 100%. I'm just going to leave it for the evening. And in the morning at low tide, I'll see what I have here. I'm basically at the mercy of the tides. I'm going to take a look at all my floats here and check all the chambers and see if there's any water in it. And the only way to get it out is through the inspection holes in the top with a siphon. That's definitely salt water. I'll let this drain out. It's hard to say how much is in there. Now, hopefully we don't have any water in this one. No. This barge is getting kind of old. This here is looking like it didn't hold.
The pontoon has an old hairline fracture that Mike's trying to patch with waterproof epoxy. But it's no match for the corrosive salt water of Passagshack Bay.
It's weeping a little bit. That's definitely taking water there. Get this old stuff out of here. I'm gonna repair it again. Because it's on the seam where these two pieces were welded, that's why it didn't hold.
A new layer of sealant is a temporary fix that should hold long enough to get him home.
All right, I I got that repair done. The only other thing, this here, I'm not sure if that dent has anything to do with it or not, but it looks like it could. With this thing just rolling on the beach here in the surge last night, it could have stressed this weld. Just kind of blend it into the edges and make it look like art. This stuff it's got a real quick dry time, and so there'll be no problem with this curing up in time, and hopefully that'll take care of my problems. All right.
But the fix can't be tested until the barge floats at the next high tide, 3 hours from now.
Hopefully this is gonna float.
"600 feet above the Alaskan wilderness."
It's a long, slow grind across the flats here.
Morgan's closing in on the treacherous peaks of the Great Alaska Range.
Definitely been a little more cloud buildup as I move towards the mountains here.
And the final safe haven before the mountain crossing.
I'm getting close to my fuel drop location.
This is the last gravel runway on the route between his homestead and the nearest town. The ideal location to hide an emergency stash of fuel.
Gonna lose some altitude here. Oh. I got my storage jugs here. They're just normal gas cans. I'm gonna fill them all the way up and save my fuel bladders for flying.
Okay, good to the last drop here. Stuff is precious.
The 10 gallons of fuel are enough for an extra 50 miles of flight time that could be a critical survival buffer if the unexpected strikes.
I'm gonna cover them with this trash bag and tuck it under the cans here. That way, you know, if it rains a lot, water won't seep into the cans or on the lid. Pretty soon the brush will be leafed out. You won't be able to see back in here at all. But this fuel clash could really save me a lot of trouble. Okay, gonna have to remember this spot.
The fuel will keep for up to a year, making this a critical lifeline for the new pilots.
Better get Margaret on the radio and see what the weather's doing back at home as long as I'm here on the ground. Our place is right on the edge of the mountain range on the other side. And it's really common that, you know, it's doing one thing on one side of the range and something completely different on the other. Oh?
Hey, we're getting a little bit of rain here now, and there's definitely some buildup to the west.
Okay. Do you think it's moving in quick?
Yeah, I wouldn't. It looks like it's moving pretty fast this way, so you might want to hang out for a little bit longer and check back in maybe an hour.
Well, I'll hang tight. Thanks for the update. Try to call me back if it looks like it's getting better.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay. Love you. Bye.
At altitude, the aluminum plane is vulnerable to high winds and lightning strikes that could cripple its instruments.
That's definitely not a good thing. Thunderstorms are pretty dangerous for light planes and cause a lot of dangerous wind conditions.
And with no experience flying in these mountains, Morgan's not taking any chances.
Might make it impossible for me to land there. I'm just gonna hang out here and just wait this weather out.
In the Montana backwoods, veteran trapper Tom Moore is battling the brush to claim every last dollar before the season closes.
Well, boots are slick.
But the payday doesn't come easy. And finally, after a 2-mile fight to cross nature's wild gauntlet,
We made it to the water.
he's reached the promised land.
That looks beavery, too. It goes way back up in there. Needs to be explored for sure. The first thing I'm going to do is get the canoe into the water and then go paddling around here and seeing what kind of sign is here. It's a fresh beaver chew. Surely there's some beaver houses in here. We'll just find them and find the hottest spots, and we'll put some traps in the hot spots. And all right, we're moving. Here's a couple fresh sticks right here that they've just been chewed off. Well, there's a beaver house right there. This is the spot I'm looking for right here. This channel here goes underwater and into the beaver house, and this is one of their food lanes that they come out to get the food. This should be the place to set the traps right now. We've got the house, we've got all the food is stored right here in the river. This is a real exciting thing. I mean, when you find beaver sign, there's always an excitement about, God, what's in here, you know? All right, we got a good set in here. Let's go put some more traps in. The slough is so big, it's big enough to have 2 or 3 beaver families in it.
A single beaver family can have as many as 12 members. At $200 a pelt, Tom's hard-fought gamble could be a last-minute jackpot.
And there's a tunnel that goes underneath here and goes into that water over on the other side. Be an ideal place for a trap here.
Tom's an expert at locating the high traffic lanes in this maze of interconnected waterways, a skill he'll need to maximize his catch.
Moving back there.
High tide is rolling in on Kodiak's eastern coast.
I really don't know if this is gonna float.
The moment of truth for Mike Horstman's quick fix.
But here in the next 30 minutes, this should get light in the rear end, in the stern, and if everything goes well, it'll start getting a little drifty.
But to dislodge from the beach, the fully loaded 1-ton barge needs a tow.
Floating a little hard on the one side. It's not floating 100% like I like it, but it looks a lot better than it did before. I think it's heavy, real heavy. So I want to get it across the bay as fast as I can.
Mike's homestead is a straight 6-mile shot across the bay, but the currents are cold and the crossing treacherous.
With this situation, I'm undergunned as far as horsepower. It's just a small motor, it's just a small boat. There's no hidey holes here, there's no real shelter as I go across. I'm completely exposed to the weather and the elements. You just gotta pay attention here, you don't wanna get in trouble.
In the Ozark Mountains, steel is the stock in trade for bladesmith Jason Hawk, whether forged or salvaged.
These are a portion of the pieces that I got from the plane.
A recent discovery in the backcountry proved to be an unexpected jackpot of high-grade steel.
This is rusty gold.
But the scrap cables are thin strands of metal too thin to forge until they're shaped into a uniform bar called a billet.
So in order to make this billet, I've got to tack weld all these different little cables together. Well, I got this thing about as together as it's gonna get right now. Time to get it in the forge, heat it up, and tighten it up.
Melting the individual strands together requires high heat and compression.
Just gonna go for some light taps. What I want to do is make sure that everything's sealed up and that basically it becomes a solid piece of steel.
But the process creates a byproduct called scale, small flakes of iron ore that are overworked and unstable.
I've got a lot of scale built up on the outside surface, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean it up.
An ancient Japanese technique of rapid heating and cooling refines the steel.
It's a wet anvil technique. You wet the anvil itself, wet the hammer head, you bring it out of the forge and hammer it. You're basically creating micro explosions. It's forcing that scale to shatter. But really, it's got a potential to go real bad real quick.
Cool the steel too quickly and it can crack. Heat it too long and it'll melt.
I'm almost done with cable. Stock's getting a lot thinner. Forge is running hot.
On the Hawk homestead in the Ozarks,
Damn it.
Jason's feeling the heat.
So the steel got overheated. I basically melted the steel off the end of the bar.
His melted steel is compromised.
You're working high temperatures on the edge of melting. It happens. Which means my knife just became shorter.
The remaining steel billets are stacked and welded more than a dozen times to produce a tight grain that can withstand the knife-making process.
I'm gonna squeeze these layers down, forge welding everything together, and start drawing that billet out. When it's about double the length originally it was, I'm gonna cut it and I'm gonna fold it back on itself. What it's doing, it's homogenizing the steel. So a lot of metal still to move. I'll just keep stretching it as we go.
In North Carolina,
Hello, Eustace.
Hey, Gary.
What you got here for us?
Well, this is that bed I've been telling you about.
it's the moment of truth for Eustace's plan to make a fast buck from a handcrafted rustic bed frame.
I'm really hoping this bed will sell and bring me a good price and help me get closer to getting my down payment done.
Look at the joinery. So you've got dovetail right
Yeah,
here.
Dovetail on the center there.
Yeah. That is beautiful. And this is white pine?
Yeah, white pine. I could see it in his face that he liked this as soon as I saw him looking at the bed.
How beautiful.
Gary sees what we've done. He understands what goes into it. This is a real old-timey way of putting stuff together.
Well, I'll tell you something. I think for something of this nature, I mean, you're probably looking at $3,500, maybe $4,000 on something like this.
That sounds pretty good.
This fits right up our alley. These type of things bring a large dollar amount because of the care that's put into it and the time that goes into it. And this is the type of product that people are looking for nowadays. We could write you a check and we could take this one today.
That's what we need to do. We need to get some money pretty fast. We got to make a payment on some land. Heavy duty.
All right. We'll bring it around here and put it in the showroom.
Cool.
The sale brings Eustace's down payment to $29,000, about 20% of the land price. But he won't know if it's enough until he makes his bid.
They say you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's where I feel like I am. Hey, can you believe that?
Felt pretty sweet, man.
I'm loving it.
In the shadow of the Great Alaska Range.
Well, it's like I'm gonna be here a little while.
What's a simple rainstorm on the ground could be deadly in the air over the mountains.
The rain's really coming down now.
Rather than risk disaster, Morgan's waiting it out. But the delay is burning precious daylight.
You know, it's just too late in the day. I'm gonna have to sleep here for the night. Damn it. Well, it is what it is, you know? It's like not the area where you want to push things. Now, I've been warned more than once about get home-itis or get there-itis, where you're just more focused on the destination than the journey. And in this case, there's no reason to try to push it. I think I can stick my pot under one of these drips and get enough water to make a cup of coffee with. Wasn't expecting to be using this survival gear quite so soon, but sure glad I have it. This is not what I want to be doing right now. I want to be getting going, but maybe this thunderstorm will move on by. So tomorrow I'll be getting up in the air and hopefully make it home.
In northwest Montana.
Now up in a tree there.
A hard day's work yields a surprising reward.
Well, that might be an extra bonus here, not it?
A rare 10-pound porcupine with a valuable hide and quills.
I think I'm gonna go harvest a porcupine. He's got good hair on him. I can actually make money from a porcupine. I'll be able to sell all the quills I can harvest along with the hair and even the front toenails. Now this is a little added bonus to the old trap line. Years and years ago, before the white man brought beads to this country to trade to the Indians for decorative styling, the Indians used dyed porcupine quills. These are little round rawhide rings, and the quills are all wrapped around them, and the ends are all glued on the back. Lots of the war shirts that the Indians wore, like on the plains, would have one of these mounted on the front of it.
On average, a single porcupine has a staggering 30,000 quills.
Also, the hair has a value to it. The Native Americans used this hair for what they call roaches. Dancing roaches, it was a headdress that they'd wear. There's hours of plucking on that porcupine I've got to look forward to. But we're not finished yet. We still got traps to check, and seasons are going to close in a few more days, so that's all we can do is just try to wrap up what we got going and bring in as much fur as we can, and it looks like another successful season.
Back in Alaska, Mike's 2-day ordeal is nearly over.
The pontoon is holding up, but it's taken an hour and a half longer than I had hoped.
The barge is loaded with 1 ton worth of supplies, and it's putting a strain on the motor.
Probably another 20 minutes, we'll be on the beach. We don't believe in miracles, we count on them.
Once darkness falls, Mike's only choice is to navigate by memory.
I know where most of the rocks are, but you gotta pay attention and be careful all the time. As far as I know, there's nothing in the way. I'm gonna take it up on the beach and unload it first thing in the morning. Finally, I can see the beach. Here we go. Here we are. We made it. Big relief. Come on, honey. Easy. See, we're home. How's that? I'm gonna start the tractor and tie this rig off.
Mike keeps a tractor on the beach for loading and unloading, but in a pinch, the 1,000-pound machine doubles as a heavyweight anchor.
That's all there is to that. I'm just gonna let it go dry and come back in the morning at low tide and unload it.
In the Ozark Mountains, it's taken 3 straight hours in the forge to turn a pile of reclaimed steel into a usable block. But the effort's not worth a dime if Jason can't shape it into a sellable blade.
I'm trying to keep everything packed in, nice and even. I'll just keep stretching it as we go.
The hydraulic press draws out the length, while the hammer gives it shape.
More length, a little more width. You'll be there.
So the blade shape's really coming together. I mean, it's just about time to start heating up the oil for the quench.
Quenching hardens the blade by rapidly cooling it in an oil bath. But if it's done too quickly, the atomic structure of the metal breaks down, destroying its chances of becoming a quality knife.
It's either gonna be great or a loss.
Anytime you do a quench, there's things that can go wrong. You just don't know what's going to happen when you're dealing with unknown steel from this planet. So if there's impurity in the steel at all, that thing can blow.
So far, not looking like anything majorly bad happened.
Grinding and sanding reduces the blade's thickness and gives it a razor-sharp edge.
So I'm gonna clean it up, use a little grinding wheel.
You can start really seeing the grain coming through, the difference, the subtleties. It makes for a visually interesting piece.
At this point, you start seeing the character of the knife.
The handle is carved from a block of rambutan, Southeast Asian hardwood.
Handles are important. They're a lot more important than people think. They've got to be perfect. The balance, the look, everything complements each other.
I'm really liking it.
I'm to the place that it's time to sharpen this thing.
Very light. Very light. Super thin. Let's go see what it'll do.
Now it's just time to take it in the kitchen and test her out.
Ooh. Yeah, that's pretty thin.
make a couple cuts, I'm pleased as can be. I don't know anybody that's made a knife with just materials that are from the plain. All right, you're gonna be like that. What started as a bust for a hunting trip, it's gonna turn in some pretty good money for my family. And that's really exciting because to me, the story is what it's all about.
As a new day dawns over Alaska's Eagle Harbor, Mike's back on the beach to finish the job.
I'm very glad that I got these here because everything that I did bring this trip is key to what I'm going to do here this spring. I got some gasoline for the generator and outboards, propane for hunting camp. I've got anchors for a mooring buoy, just an endless amount of loot. I'm real excited about the upcoming spring season when the clients are coming, setting up camp, looking forward to the hunt. The whole reason I live here is because of the bears. The snow's going away, the green's coming on, and this year, it's gonna be great. Delcy, come here. We got bears to hunt, and things to do.
Next time on the season finale of Mountain Men.
Now I'm approaching the first line of ridges here. Where'd the hell that come from? Yeah, there's definitely cloud coming in real quick now. Can't see very far ahead.
This is our last big shot to pick up a few furs before the season ends.
Some of these stretches here are going to be much faster, so we have to be careful. There we go. Uh-oh.
Oh, man. Offer on the property. So I got to come up with this last $700 to make the deposit. First person to put the money in his hand is going to take it, so I need this cash today.